At my dad's birthday party, my name tag didn't just have my name, it had a title. The Disappointment. My stepmom, Stephanie, took one look and laughed. Well, at least she thought it was funny. So I stood up, tapped my glass with a fork, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I'd like to make a toast, to the last time any of you will ever see me." My dad choked on his drink, but the real shock came when I turned and walked straight out the door, leaving behind one final goodbye. I'm 32 years old, and if you asked my dad to describe me, that name tag pretty much sums it up. Not because I've broken any laws, not because I'm unemployed, and definitely not because I've done anything truly wrong, but simply because I chose to live life my own way instead of following the script he had written for me. My dad, James, has always been the kind of man who wants everything done on his terms. He's big on control, appearances, and, most of all, family loyalty, so long as that loyalty serves his interests. My parents split up when I was 10. It wasn't a messy divorce, at least not on the surface, but my dad wasted no time moving on. Within a year, he was married to Stephanie, a woman with 2 kids from her previous marriage, Hunter and Olivia. That's when things started to change. At first, I tried. I really did. I was just a kid, and I wanted my dad to be happy. Emily was all smiles and warmth, at least in public. She was one of those people who tried a little too hard, hugging me just a bit too tightly and gushing about how we were going to be best friends. But behind closed doors, it became clear where her priorities lay. And they didn't include me. Dad, who had always been present in my life before, suddenly had new responsibilities. He wasn't just my dad anymore, he was their dad. It started small. Missing my soccer games, but always making it to Hunter's. Forgetting to pick me up from school, but somehow never late to Olivia's dance recitals. Then it escalated. By the time I turned 14, I wasn't just expected to accept this new family dynamic, I was expected to serve it. Babysitting the stepkids. Taking on chores they never had to do. Playing the role of the good big sister, while they got away with everything. If I ever spoke up about it, my dad would sigh, exhausted, like I was the problem. They need more attention. You're older. Be mature. Stephanie. She was more direct. You're being selfish. But the breaking point came when my dad drained the savings account my mom had set up for me, money meant for my college tuition. My mom took him to court over it, fought tooth and nail to get it back, but by then, the damage was already done. I was furious. I barely spoke to him during my last year of high school, and when I left for college, paying my own way, I only came back for the occasional holiday. Years passed, but things never really healed between us. I still got invited to family events, but they felt more like obligations than genuine attempts to reconnect. I knew how my dad and Emily saw me, I was the difficult one. The outsider who refused to play along. Meanwhile, Hunter and Olivia could do no wrong. Which brings me to my dad's birthday party. Emily was going all out, one of those extravagant, invite everyone we've ever met kind of events. I hadn't planned on going, but my aunt, one of the few relatives still in my corner, talked me into it. Just stop by for a little while, she said. Maybe things have changed. Spoiler alert, they hadn't. The second I walked in, I could feel it. That familiar, unwelcome tension. People I hadn't seen in years were there, but instead of warm greetings, I got stiff nods. Conversations swirled around me, but no one really pulled me in. Across the room, I spotted my dad, laughing with some old friends. When his eyes landed on me, his smile faltered, just for a second, like he hadn't actually expected me to show up. I was already regretting coming when I noticed a small table near the entrance. A stack of name tags sat neatly arranged on top. Emily had done this before at other parties, claiming it helped people mingle. It was her thing. Most of the tags were normal. Uncle Robert. Cousin Amanda. Neighbor James. And then, I saw mine. I froze. Because mine didn't just have my name on it. It had something extra. Something that made my Jamesack twist. I picked it up, staring at it, my fingers tightening around the edges. Across the room, a familiar laugh rang out. Stephanie. I lifted my head and found her by the bar, a wine glass in hand, watching me with that smug little smirk. Heat rose in my chest. I could feel eyes on me now. A few people had noticed me standing there. No one said anything, but I could sense it. That silent, unspoken expectation. Don't make a scene. I took a slow, steady breath and placed the name tag back down. Smoothed it out, aligned it perfectly with the others. For a brief moment, I almost laughed. Of course. Of course, she would pull something like this. This was classic Stephanie. Never outright cruel, never obvious enough for anyone to call her out directly, just subtle, calculated digs designed to put me in my place. If I reacted, I'd look like the problem. I should have known the second I walked in that she'd pull something like this. A hand landed gently on my shoulder, and I turned to find my aunt standing there, the one person in this family who had ever truly been on my side. Her brows were drawn together, lips pressed into a firm line. She'd seen the name tag. Her eyes flicked toward Emily before she asked, soft and low, "Are you okay?" I forced a tight smile. "Yeah," I lied. "I'm fine." But I wasn't. I was drained, the kind of exhaustion that sits deep in your bones, the kind you can't quite put into words. Because this wasn't new. This wasn't even the worst thing Emily had done. It was just another entry in her long-running campaign to remind me exactly where I stood. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked right out that door. But something in me dug its heels in. Not this time. So instead, I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and did the last thing Emily expected. I smiled. A real, easy smile, as if nothing had happened at all. Then, as a server passed by, I plucked a glass of champagne from the tray, tapped my nail lightly against the rim, and turned toward the room. If Emily wanted a show, I'd give her one. The soft clink wasn't loud, but it was just enough. Heads turned in my direction. Conversations paused. Even Emily hesitated for the briefest moment, her wine glass hovering near her lips, eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to figure out what I was up to. I let the moment stretch a little too long, long enough for tension to creep in, long enough to make her wonder if I was about to make a toast. Then, with a small shake of my head, I turned away and walked deeper into the party. I wasn't going to give her the reaction she wanted. Not yet. The party itself was exactly what I expected, crowded, meticulously staged, every detail expensive and curated to perfection. Emily didn't just throw events, she orchestrated them. This wasn't just about celebrating my dad's birthday. It was a performance. A chance to showcase her perfect life, her perfect family, her perfect children. Her children. Not me. Hunter and Olivia were already in the center of the room, basking in attention. Olivia, always the star of the show, was surrounded by doting relatives, gushing about her upcoming wedding. And of course, Dad's paying for everything, she announced, flashing her engagement ring like a trophy. We wanted something tasteful, you know. Something elegant. Not one of those tacky Pinterest weddings. I bit back a laugh. That was Olivia, polished, rehearsed, just self-absorbed enough to make everything about her without seeming too obvious about it. Hunter, meanwhile, leaned casually against the bar, nodding along as a few of Dad's old friends congratulated him on his new job, one I'd bet money he hadn't actually earned. Hunter had never worked for anything in his life. Every opportunity had been handed to him, every mistake quietly erased. For a split second, I considered walking over, inserting myself into the conversation just to see them squirm. But before I could, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Well, look who finally showed up. I turned. Dad was already making his way toward me, drink in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. I smiled, thin, practiced. "Wouldn't miss it." He nodded, glancing around the party before settling his gaze back on me. "I hear you've been keeping busy." And there it was. The way he always managed to acknowledge my existence without actually asking anything real. I shrugged. "Yeah, work's good. Bought a house last year." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "A house?" "Yep." He took a slow sip of his drink, saying nothing else. That was the thing about my dad, he hated when I succeeded. Every milestone I reached on my own, every accomplishment that didn't require his money or approval, chipped away at the version of me he preferred. The version he could shake his head at in disappointment. The one he could talk about in quiet, pitying tones whenever people asked about me. I could see it in his face, he was searching for something to say, some way to undercut the moment. But before he could, Stephanie's voice slid in like a blade. "Well," she said, stepping up beside him, her smile sharp and glinting. At least she finally did something responsible. Heat flared in my chest. I turned to her, and she was beaming, all teeth and false warmth. But I knew that look. I'd seen it 100 times before. Emily had a gift. She could insult you to your face, and if you got upset, you were the problem. She was just joking. You were just too sensitive. I should have walked away. I should have let it go. I turned my gaze to her, letting the moment settle between us, heavy and undeniable. "Is it?" I asked, my voice deceptively light. "Because I don't think this is about a name tag at all, Stephanie." Her smile didn't falter, but I saw the way her fingers twitched against the stem of her glass, the way her shoulders stiffened just slightly. She was trying to play this off, trying to spin it, but I wasn't giving her the out she wanted. "You've always been good at this," I continued. "At making sure I know exactly where I stand. Just subtle enough that if I react, I look unreasonable. Just cruel enough to remind me I don't belong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was the kind of party where drama was whispered about, not addressed head-on, and here I was, breaking the unspoken rules. Emily let out a breathy, practiced laugh. "Oh, for God's sake. You're being ridiculous. It's a joke. You really need to lighten up." I tilted my head. "Right. A joke. And if I'm upset, that's my fault, isn't it? I'm too sensitive. I'm making a scene." She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. "You know, for years, I bought into that. I let you and Dad and everyone else convince me that I was the problem. That if I just smiled more, if I was quieter, if I was easier to love, then maybe, just maybe, you'd treat me like I mattered." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I could see Olivia shifting, her perfect mask of poise slipping just slightly, her eyes darting toward our father, gauging his reaction. Hunter looked amused, like he was enjoying the show, but even he wasn't smirking quite as much now. And my dad? His face was unreadable, but I knew him well enough to see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers clenched around his drink. "But I don't believe that anymore," I said, my voice steady. "Because I finally realized something. It was never about me. It was always about control." Emily scoffed. "Oh, please. You needed me to be small," I cut her off, turning my full attention to her. "You needed me to be the failure, the outsider, the disappointment, because as long as I was, you got to be the perfect one. The real daughter. The one who belonged." Her face paled, just slightly. "And Dad," I continued, turning back to him, "you needed that, too, didn't you?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "That's not. You needed a black sheep so you could feel better about the children who actually lived up to your expectations. So you could shake your head and sigh about how difficult I was while conveniently ignoring the fact that I never needed you to clean up my messes. I never needed your money. I never needed anything from you. The weight of the word settled over the room. And then I smiled. But you know what? I'm glad, I said, reaching for my champagne glass again, lifting it casually. Because I did it anyway. Without you. And for the first time in my life, I don't need this family to tell me who I am. Emily stared at me, her carefully curated world cracking at the edges. My father's expression had darkened, his grip white-knuckled around his glass. I took a slow sip of champagne, savoring the stunned silence. Then I set the glass down, turned on my heel, and walked away. I turned my gaze to her, letting the weight of the moment settle between us. You're right, I said smoothly. It is just a name tag. Stephanie's expression flickered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly, giving a little shrug as she took another sip of her wine. See, she said, her voice light, casual, like we were just having a normal conversation. No need to make a big deal out of nothing. You always take things so personally. I nodded slowly, tilting my head as if considering her words. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's not just this. Maybe it's the fact that it's always something, isn't it? A little dig. A little joke. A little reminder that no matter what I do, I'll always be the disappointment in your eyes. The smile on her face froze at the edges. My father exhaled sharply, stepping forward slightly, his tone clipped. That's enough. I met his gaze head-on. Oh, I agree, I said, my voice calm. It is enough. And before anyone could process what was happening, I picked up my glass again, raised it just slightly, and let the next words fall like a stone into the silence. To the last time you'll ever see me. The entire room seemed to inhale at once. My father stiffened beside Stephanie, his fingers tightening around his glass. Someone in the back muttered, "Wait, what?" I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. I set my glass down with deliberate ease, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. I could feel them watching me, their confusion morphing into something else, panic, maybe, or realization. Because this wasn't like the other times. I wasn't storming off in anger, wasn't leaving in tears. I was just, done. I reached the door and glanced back one last time. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was walking away from a fight. I was walking toward something. Toward freedom. Toward peace. Toward the life I had built for myself, away from the constant push and pull of a family that had never truly accepted me. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside, filling my lungs with a deep, steadying breath. It was over. I had finally cut the cord, severed the ties I should have broken years ago. There would be no more pretending, no more bending over backward for approval that was never going to come. I drove home in silence, every mile putting more distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. But even as I curled up on my couch that night, wrapped in the quiet of my own space, a thought lingered at the edges of my mind. Had I gone too far? Had I been too harsh? The next few days were a blur of missed calls and unanswered texts. I avoided social media because I already knew what I'd find, the fallout, the speculation, the carefully crafted narratives about me and my outburst. The family group chat was in flames, messages pouring in, some demanding explanations, others pretending nothing had happened at all. I ignored them all. Except for one. My aunt. The only person in that room who had ever truly understood me. "Are you okay?" I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. I was okay. Better than I had been in years. But I was also untethered in a way I hadn't expected. I just need time. She didn't push. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice carrying that same edge, the one he always used when he was disappointed in me. "I'm at home," I said simply. "I'm not coming back." Silence. A long, heavy pause. "You can't just walk away like this," he said finally. "This family, We have to stick together. I didn't even hesitate. Not if sticking together means pretending to be someone I'm not, I said. Not anymore. That was the last time we spoke. Weeks passed. I stayed away from the family gatherings, the birthdays, the weddings, the carefully orchestrated events designed to maintain the illusion of closeness. The rest of the family fell into line, either siding with my father and Emily or pretending like none of it had ever happened. I heard through the grapevine that my father was hurt, that Emily was furious, that Olivia and Hunter were disappointed in me for making a scene. But none of it mattered. Because for the first time in my life, I felt free. Was it easy? No. Was it the right thing to do? I still wasn't sure. But I knew one thing. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. And now? I was done trying.